Today's episode includes an open discussion about mental illness, its side effects, addiction, self-harm, and suicide. These topics can be difficult for some. If so, we recommend that you stop listening right now. Welcome to Love in a Podcast. I'm Nate, and across from me is my beautiful co-host.
Hey, I'm Shiloh. Tonight's episode is Love and a Bipolar Partner.
We want to start off by saying that we are not professionals. This episode is a combination of research from mental health professionals and our own experiences and what works for us. Before making any changes in regard to your mental health and lifestyle, please speak to a mental health professional and do your own research.
Right, exactly. First and foremost, though, what is bipolar disorder? According to medicalnewstoday.com, bipolar disorder causes a person to experience episodes of mania or hypomania and depression. People who suspect that they have bipolar disorder, like Nathaniel said, should see a doctor who will perform several tests, and then they may refer you to a psychiatrist or psychologist for further assessment. According to the National Institution for Mental Health, which is NIM, do you remember that movie, The Secret of NIM? Love it. Okay, so according to those people, an estimated 2.8% of U.S. adults had bipolar disorder in the past year. 2.8% of U.S. adults. Past year prevalence of bipolar disorder among adults was similar for males, 2.9%, and females, 2.8%. So it doesn't like either gender more. Although the symptoms come and go, bipolar disorder usually requires lifetime treatment and does not go away on its own. Bipolar disorder can be an important factor in suicide, job loss, and family discord, but proper treatment leads to better outcomes. So just like every other mental health issue out there, bipolar is hugely misunderstood and often used very freely in conversation by some people who have no idea of what's being said. Maybe you've said it before, you've heard someone say it before, it's out of context, and you call someone bipolar, But the stigmas attached to bipolar range from that person's crazy as hell to she has mood swings and I don't care enough to understand why, so I'll just call her bipolar, to he is dangerous because of his mental illness and I'm going to assume no one is safe around him. It's really tough. But personally, I have my own mental illness, so I was seeking to understand Nathaniel from the very beginning. It interested me to learn, but I really cared to find out exactly what made him tick or talk. So first question, really quickly, did you experience misunderstanding while growing up before and after diagnosis? Just, don't hesitate in explaining how it made you feel.
Yeah, I would say so. I had a lot of people that would make comments about my energy or my mood or something like that. And I just thought people were being mean.
Yeah.
But they were calling me out for a behavior that they didn't deem was normal.
Right.
Even though I felt like I was normal. As often I was called crazy. I was called, I was referred to as being a joke sometimes because I was a total joker in school. I was, but at the same time, when it was time to take me serious, no one ever did. And it was really difficult, being that way because I didn't understand why.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier now to understand why that actually occurred. And the other thing about it was that I was very passionate. So my passion would, be reflected in everything. And I would get obsessed with certain things. And I would just obsess over my friends. Like, you said you were going to come over. Are you coming over? Are you coming over? You said you were going to come over. And then when it was too late, I would get mad and be like, why didn't you come over? Oh, this sucks. I really wanted you to come over. We were supposed to hang out. And that was an everyday thing. That was probably really tough on a lot of my friends. But I have to say my friends stuck by me regardless. And
yeah, you're very fortunate in that way.
I definitely am. And, I was talking with my mom the other day after she watched a video I sent her about a gentleman who has a YouTube channel called Bipolar Warrior or Bipolar Warriors. He and his mom did a video where they talked back and forth. And so I sent that to my mom, and he talked about how, or his mom talked about how he was violent as a little kid. I wasn't violent. I wasn't like that, but instead I was, over anxious. I was over excited. I was over upset. I was just kind of an extreme of one of those, and
Right.
very rarely was I just kind of like on an even keel.
Right.
So
And that's that I think, sorry, but that I think is where the misunderstanding comes in. Because as a child, they don't diagnose children usually, which we'll get into that in a little while, and we'll get into more of your childhood. But okay, so, people suffer from depression and people suffer from anxiety, but people with bipolar disorder tend to experience very intense emotional states along with other changes, which come in episodes. They're called episodes. So do you see in the moment while you're having an episode, how that episode is affecting your life in that very moment? Like, is it determining your decision making? And of course, just briefly, yeah. Do you know in the moment that everything's happening? How is it affecting your life in the moment?
Pre-diagnosis, no. I just thought that when everything went gray and black,
Yeah.
that, and it would last for a week or 2 weeks. I just thought that was kind of normal. That happened to people, and
Really
that
scary.
that it's just probably depression. And I don't want to, of course, lessen depression. It's very serious, but I thought that, it was something that was much more typical than what it ended up being.
Yeah.
Now, I'm starting to realize when it's coming on. I am also starting to recognize when it's already in process. You're helping me actually figure that out.
Oh, good.
You are asking like, hey, are you feeling okay?
Right.
So now, yeah, I mean, I even if I'm in an episode and I don't know if I'm in an episode, I'm constantly thinking, is this normal? Like I never did that before. I always
Right.
just thought I was normal. Now I'm constantly thinking, am I normal? Whether I'm in a manic episode, a depressive episode, or I'm never on an even keel, but if I was as even as possible, I still am thinking, am I okay right now? Am I normal? And it's been like that for about 3 years now since I was
Right.
diagnosed. So it's kind of tough to, it's kind of tough. I don't always know,
Right.
but I'm getting better.
Yeah, it sounds scary, I think, and pretty exhausting,
Very.
because symptoms can last over a period of a few weeks, months, or even up to years. And I can't imagine what that must be like for someone. So, Nathaniel, while I list these different characteristics, I want you to just acknowledge them with a yes or a no if you have experienced them. And everyone listening, I want you to let it sink in how that must be for someone to have these characteristics without their control. So a manic phase is characterized by extreme happiness, hopefulness, and excitement,
Yes.
irritability, anger, fits of rage, and hostile behavior,
Yes.
restlessness,
Yes.
agitation,
Yes.
rapid speech,
Yes.
poor concentration and judgment,
Yes.
increased energy,
Yes.
less need for sleep,
Yes.
unusually high sex drive,
Yes.
setting unrealistic goals,
Yes.
and paranoia.
Yes. And I would also like to mention spending sprees.
That is definitely, you're 100% right, but he is. That's something that we've talked about many times, and he has plenty of examples of when that does occur. So, helping us to understand a little bit more in the mania phase, what are you aware of, and how can you help us to understand your thought process and or your actions without talking so much about the depression phase yet, but in the manic phase, say your speech is really rapid, or you have you're setting unrealistic goals, you're very paranoid, you're not sleeping. Is there a thought process that's going on? Like, does it feel, and I hate to use the word normal, but when you're like, as in you're not having an episode, can you tell the difference? And I guess that goes along with the question that you just answered, but I'm talking about these specific characteristics, these specific things.
Well, for me, the mania phase, the mania episode is much harder to tell than a depressive episode. With a manic episode, I am often, mine is usually on a positive level.
Right.
It's usually, I feel like I'm much more capable to do things and accomplish things than I actually really am, which is again, setting unrealistic goals. That's all part of that.
Right.
I talk constantly, that just doesn't stop. And that was a thing when I was growing up, that was a constant joke. But you know, it is something that, I don't always know. And I'll be honest with you. Sometimes it feels amazing. I mean, there are moments of euphoria where you're just like, you can do anything. You can absolutely do anything. And I want to tell everybody in the world how great they are. And I want to do anything I can. I want to, you know, one of the downsides is starting projects and not finishing them. You know, that's like, that often occurs with a manic episode. But you know, there's a lot to it, and it's taking me a while to recognize that in the moment. So
for sure. Now I'm going to list some of the things that can occur during a depressive phase. And again, I just want you to acknowledge with a yes or no if you have ever experienced these. Sadness and crying.
Yes.
Feelings of hopelessness, worthlessness, and guilt.
Yes.
Loss of energy.
Yes.
Loss of interest or pleasure in everyday activities.
Yes.
Trouble concentrating and making decisions.
Yes.
Irritability.
Yes.
Need for more sleep or sleeplessness.
Yes.
A change in appetite.
Yes.
Weight loss or gain.
Yes.
Suicidal thoughts and attempts at suicide.
Yes.
So listening in on this, guys, I want you to really think about what that is without having control of these ideas and thoughts and, you know, whatever it is that he's going through, or someone that is dealing with bipolar. There's no control here. And understand that patients may feel normal, which again, I hate using that word, but well, maybe you can explain why you hate the word normal. But if patients are feeling normal without any symptoms in between episodes of mania and depression, I think it's, you know, from what I can understand, I think that after one of these episodes is over and you've gone through the motions and you've gone through everything, I think that there's some sort of just exhaustion and possibly like, I don't know. I've seen all of the energy from you just totally depleted. And that's in a normal, quote unquote, normal phase. So what are you, okay, so just like with the manic phase, in the depressive phase, what are you aware of? And how can you help us understand your thought process and your actions?
You know, I was hospitalized a couple times for being in a depressive episode, you know, for weeks on end.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where I couldn't even tell that I truly needed help. You know, like at the first time people actually came to the house to tell me I needed help, that, you know, they were mental health professionals.
What age was this?
This was just a few years ago.
Right.
So like, you know,
right before you were diagnosed.
Right. And, you know, and the whole time, you know, I was very lucky because some other people there had bipolar disorder when I was at the hospital, and they, you know, they had diagnosed me pretty quickly from all my mental health notes. I was misdiagnosed with depression many, many years ago. And so this whole time I was taking medication that was actually making things worse for me.
Right.
And by the time I got to the hospital, you know, I was able to talk to people that helped me with their own version, because everybody's version or everybody's bipolar is different. It doesn't, you know, yeah, I said yes to every single one of those bullet points, but at the same time, it doesn't mean I'm going to experience those all at once or anything like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but again, the depressive state, you know, easier for me to figure out. I didn't know it. I didn't know that that's what I was experiencing. Again, I thought that there were dark periods that people had, and that's just what was going on with me.
Right.
You know, I just, and I'm sure anyone who has depression can understand when people tell you like, oh, you're just not yourself, or can't you just cheer up or something like that, we can all relate to that. And that's rough. That's pretty rough. But I just figured that all of it again was just a part of life, and the worst of it I've ever had is just basically feeling like I didn't want to be alive, and this might be a trigger warning for people, by the way. So just know that I'm going to tell you my own experience with that, just real quick. But basically, for me, it was, I would have been so okay with not waking up the next morning when I would go to bed.
Yeah.
As I developed alcoholism to the worst extent where I was taking pills and drinking blackout every single day, every day. And, I was missing work for long periods. And, I was dealing with I have this nervous system disorder as well. So it was just piling things onto me. And I just didn't want to, I just figured if I got blackout, I might not wake up again, and that went on, that happened quite a few times.
Yeah. Trigger warning for everyone out there. If this is going to upset you too much, I would suggest just stopping it now. And listen to our second episode, which is not going to be about bipolar disorder. So with that being said, I am going to briefly speak about 2 of the 4 main types of bipolar and the criteria for diagnosis. I want you to notice that the common symptom is an unusual change in mood. So first, let's look at bipolar 1. And again, this is according to medicalnewstoday.com. For a bipolar 1 diagnosis, a person needs to have a manic episode. And the manic episode must last for at least 7 days or any duration if the symptoms are so severe that hospitalization is necessary. So remember, this could range from rapid speech to unusually high sex drive to increased energy, which are all going to be different than what's usual or your normal. So can you share which manic symptoms pop up for you? What's kind of like the most obvious thing for you out of all those bullet points?
I'd probably say like, rapid speech, is probably one of them.
That.
And then, just basically, truly a feeling of being able to conquer the world.
Right. Yeah, you definitely get this superhuman attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And it's authentic.
And it feels good too. Like that's the worst part about it.
You're very euphoric.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read a lot about that feeling because it's very interesting to me, especially being in a relationship with Nathaniel, that like the creative side comes out. And, some artists, they take a lot of different drugs to get that natural high. Well, that high that you feel naturally, because a lot of amazing creative things can come out of that euphoria. So the second disorder, the second type I'm going to talk about is bipolar 2. A person with bipolar 2 disorder has depressive episodes that come either before or after an episode of hypomania. And hypomania is a less severe form of mania. It may still cause the person to feel very euphoric or have a lot of energy, but the person may not feel that there is anything imbalanced or wrong. They have no idea anything is going on. So in your experience, has this type showed up in your life?
It's really funny because I am bipolar 1.
Yeah.
And this is almost a little inaccurate because that whole thing that, it's true that when they say like, if you're crazy, you don't know you're crazy.
Yeah. We say that and we laugh, but it's true.
It's true. I really didn't know anything was that severely wrong with me. And,
right.
Again, I just attribute it to depression. and just a kind of a normal part of life. So I mean, I can relate to bipolar too, but yeah, I mean, all of those symptoms show up in mine. It just happens that the mania and the depressive episodes are much stronger.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so the other two types of bipolar disorder are, which we won't be covering, they are cyclothymic disorder and unspecified bipolar disorder. And obviously, if you want to research those on your own, it's really very interesting stuff.
I actually want to mention too that, and I'm not sure if we're going to touch on this or not, but basically with bipolar disorder, you can also have symptoms that cross over into other things. So basically, keep that in mind, and we're going to, because we probably are going to be talking about that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't just have to be a categorization of bipolar 1 or bipolar 2 or whatever it is.
That's another thing. You basically, the trickiest part of this is recognizing and then naming it, and then having different types of ways to cope and to deal. Like I think that every single person is different in this mental illness, is from what I can understand. And how do you know you have it? So as you can imagine, testing for bipolar disorder can be a very long process. It requires doctors to monitor a person carefully and know any symptoms as well as how long they last. The average period of time for testing varies from person to person. This is just another way that the mental illness creates hardship on each individual during the testing phase. So the following that I'm going to briefly go through is an average journey of tests. So Nathaniel, I know your experience was different, so when I'm finished, you can just tell us what that looked like for you. So according to medicalnewstoday.com, doctors will often ask the person to keep a mood journal in which they can write about their general mood and any noticeable symptoms each day. Often the doctor will get permission to interview family members to learn about mood and behavioral symptoms that the person themselves may not be aware of. And then they will combine these data with their own observations about the person's symptoms and go from their full range of symptoms and go through everything by using the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, Diagnostic DSMMD. So what was your experience and how long did that take you?
For me, there wasn't any specific testing really. It was more like, I had a long history of visits with psychiatrists and therapists and all of that. So they took a lot of that into account.
Yeah.
And a previous psychiatrist was on his way, I think, to diagnosing me correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember exactly what happened or why not, but he started asking me questions very specifically about bipolar disorder.
Right.
Without saying it.
He was trying to pinpoint and ask you the questions without putting it in your mind of bipolar.
Right. And I'm going to be completely honest here. I was never 100% honest with my psychiatrist ever. I just never was.
Right.
And that's something that is just ridiculous. Why wouldn't you do that? Why would you not? Because I just didn't want to sound like I'm crazy. I didn't want to sound like there's more wrong with me. And I'm not lying when I say this. I also didn't see anything wrong with it at the time.
Right.
And I don't know if that's me, if that's, a normal situation, but that's what happened. So when I actually went to the hospital the first time for my 2-week stay, I was there with someone who could actually describe my symptoms for me. I couldn't say it. Okay. And so she described them to the doctor while we were going through this entire process.
Right.
And it just basically, it all just came together very quickly. While you're there and while you're sitting there, I waited for over 12 hours to finally get a room. And during that time though, they're working, they're trying to help because the beds were all full.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was that they look back at all your records. So anything that's out there that the psychiatrist, as long as I signed off on it, they're allowed to see, you know?
Yep.
And so they just took all of that. They took all of everything that was said in the meeting. And I don't recall much of it. I was in a very bad depressive state. And a lot of the times when I'm in a depressive episode, my memory goes away.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything. So I barely remember that. But so I was pretty useless. I mean, you could see symptoms because I was all curled up and I was just shaking constantly and all of these rough things.
It's pretty scary and it is very heartbreaking to see. So again, your testing experience went much different than the next person's because everybody is different.
I do highly recommend though that if you feel like you're listening to this and you're like, oh man, I'm kind of, follow the testing, do it right. Don't waste your time. Don't lie. And just be as completely honest and accurate. And if you have your partner or family members or best friends come with you and they can also help.
Some symptoms that may seem similar to symptoms of bipolar disorder may also appear in a few different mental health conditions. So this is yet another way this illness is so damn tricky. Okay, so for example, symptoms such as impulsive behavior and mood swings may appear in conditions such as ADHD, some anxiety disorders, substance abuse disorders, borderline personality disorder, impulse control disorders, and schizophrenia as well. Also, people with bipolar disorder may be more likely to experience other conditions such as anxiety, ADHD, and substance abuse. Nathaniel, I know you have experience with some other conditions. Would you care to share what else with us?
Sure. I was actually diagnosed in adulthood with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's been questioned since my bipolar disorder, but I exhibit some of the symptoms from that are pretty specific to it.
Right.
However, the one thing I want to mention, you had added schizophrenia at the end there, which might surprise a lot of people. They are very closely related.
I've learned that
since a lot of crossover.
Mm-hmm.
Right. A lot of schizophrenia typically has things such as hallucinations, delusions, and things like that. And that's what really separates it. However, bipolar disorder can be diagnosed with psychotic features, which actually include some schizophrenic symptoms. Right. So things like paranoia and things like that. So I actually do exhibit some of that. I have been diagnosed with that. And
with what?
With psychotic features, if you will.
Got it. Okay.
And a lot of it comes down to paranoia. And then at the same time, they're not sure what this is and they don't know where it's coming from. But, there are times where I just I'll hear classical music and it just keeps playing and playing and playing and playing and playing.
Yeah.
I think I've told you that before.
Yes, you have.
So there are different things like that where it's an obvious hallucination. So, I don't really have any explanation for it.
And your doctors don't either. Right.
And then I'll also hear, so a lot of schizophrenic people hear voices, and I'm not talking about the voice in your head that kind of tells you what, they actually hear other people's voices, and a lot of the times they listen to them.
Yeah.
So one of the things about, combating that is learning what not to listen to.
Right.
But for me, I don't have that, but I have sometimes dialogue, like people talking, but I can't understand it. It's just people talking.
When does that happen for you?
It's not common, but it's kind of like the same thing with the classical music thing happens a lot more.
Right.
And that happens probably pretty regularly, but the other stuff, I'm just grateful I don't have, it's just a dialogue. It confuses me. And then a lot of it comes out a lot of the times when I'm in my depressive episode.
So usually after the mania.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's so interesting. But without spending too much time here, I think it's super important to cover diagnosing bipolar in children. Because this very rarely happens. As the NIMH wrote, people with bipolar disorder tend to develop the condition in their late teen or early adult years. Some of the symptoms may appear similar to those of other conditions, which we just covered, such as ADHD. So, babe, please explain your own symptoms early on, including the things that your family noticed.
Well, There were quite a few things. The first thing I want to mention, and this is, I have a feeling there's going to be people that we went to school with and people from our hometown, which that's a whole story about how Shiloh and I met when we were 11 or 12.
Right.
And, all the fun that went with that. But, when I was in high school in my junior year, I actually missed an entire half the year. I did not leave my parents' house for 4 to 5 months straight.
Right.
And
I can't imagine that.
There's an entire rumor going around that I was in rehab for that whole time because of a cocaine addiction. I don't know where that one came from.
Wow, people get really bored in small towns.
Right. I mean, that's never been a problem for me, but it happens, people come up with things and whatever.
they need to name it for something. I mean,
Right.
It's got to have a name somehow.
So during that time, I actually started to explore Buddhism, Zen Buddhism in particular, and then also meditation, and which actually saved my life. That, and, I listened to a lot of Harry Chapin, during that time, who to this day still speaks to me. I listened to a lot of Chris Cornell, again, speaks to me. And so I was way too inside of my own head, and I was so paranoid and scared of leaving the house. And I was so upset with some experiences I had at school, and just combine all of that with an undiagnosed bipolar disorder in my mid-teens. And, that happened.
A recipe for, I don't want to say disaster, but
pretty much was.
It was a recipe for you to stay in your home and be misunderstood. And I can't imagine how alone that period of time was for you, regardless of how much your parents loved you and cared for you and your brother and all that. Like,
yeah, it was
you by
very
yourself
lonely.
in your head.
It was very lonely. My friends stayed my friends, though. I don't even know how that's possible, but they stayed my friends.
You're an amazing human being.
Well, but they would even come to the house. That was okay. Like I could have people over. I just couldn't go. Right. And I still remember my first day leaving. I'll never forget it. I went and picked up my friends, Chris and Devin, and and got in my car, and I even brought the family dog Gus with me to kind of make me feel a little better. But it changed everything. I got back into it. But again, and those were friends that stuck by me. So that was one example. Other examples, of course, are just that I was speaking of being overly passionate as a child.
Right.
So I was exhibiting bipolar disorder symptoms very young. But it became a lot more clear in my teens, and that's why it's such a shame I wasn't diagnosed sooner. I could have been medicated properly. I could have the tools in the toolbox I have now, to be able to deal with things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was very misunderstood as a child.
Yeah, it breaks my heart thinking of the younger you in such a lonely state of mind. So as a listener, as you get a clearer idea about bipolar and how complicated it is, the causes of bipolar disorder differ from genetics to brain structure to seasonal depression and anxiety. So between these 4 that I just mentioned, Nathaniel, does anything stand out to you? Like, did you believe you had a certain cause of bipolar, or were you just feeling lost as to why this was happening to you?
Yeah, I was lost. I mean, I didn't understand from the get-go. Right. I don't know if my parents or their parents or anybody like that, they have any bipolar symptoms or anything. I've never talked about it with them.
With your parents?
Yeah, with my parents, just in case, they have their own mental health things that they go through. So I don't know about genetics, brain structure. I don't know. Seasonal depression is, that comes along with a lot of different mental illnesses,
Yes, it does.
And anxiety. Anxiety is usually exhibited different in someone with bipolar disorder, but I totally understand people that suffer from anxiety. It's crippling. It's really, it's just not fun. But yeah, I don't really know. I am lost as to why. I don't know. Yeah, I'd love to. We don't know enough. We don't know enough about the brain. I was
just about to say that. Everyone that's listening, we're telling you things that we've researched and experienced, but there's a lot that are like unanswered questions. But we do know that just like with any other illness, mental or physical, there are consequences to face should it remain untreated. So for my depression and anxiety, I would be a totally different person without having had my meds for all these years. So please take your time while I'm listing the complications and just stop me to share some of your story.
And again, this could be a trigger for people.
Yes. If timely treatment is not provided, bipolar disorder could lead to damaged and strained relationships inside and outside the home, poor performance at school or work, alcohol and drug abuse, financial difficulties, suicidal thoughts and attempts. So he's mentioned this a little bit in this episode, but Nathaniel has overcome the biggest obstacles of acceptance and self-realization and actual, like, there's a certain thing in your mind that kind of fights against wanting to believe that you have, a mental illness, and all things are pointing to you do. But as soon as I talked to him, when him and I started talking last year, he immediately told me he had bipolar.
Within the first hour
Exactly.
of us reuniting
after,
reconnecting.
all these years from high school. And I responded with, oh, okay, I have depression.
You did.
And so we connected on a different level because we were open about our mental illnesses. We didn't shy away or judge each other. And I'm still learning how and when to share my own experience of my mental illnesses. But Nathaniel, you seemed very naturally inclined to explain the bipolar that you face to me.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where I know that I can be very difficult sometimes if you don't understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
I really made things very difficult for people in my past, former partners, friends. I've had friends that, I've had friends drop me. I mean, that's happened a couple times, like best friends that are just done with me. And that's happened a lot, and I know a lot of it's my fault for sure. So I just try to be upfront with anybody that I'm going to start a friendship or relationship with. And in our case, it really was just reaching back out to you and trying to get to know you.
Friends again, yeah.
We lived 450 miles away. It wasn't like we were sitting here thinking about romance and all this other stuff. We were just reconnecting, and because we knew each other, I felt really comfortable telling her that. And you know what? You put that out there, then she can decide if she wants to be my friend or not, and that's.
I think it's really brave that you do that for a lot of reasons, but I think, everyone listening can agree that that's a very brave move. And I admire that a lot, like living your truth and speaking your truth. So we've talked about the strained relationships. Strained relationships, they seem to be a no-brainer. But the experiences that you've shared so far are so real and so complicated. And I'm just really glad that you're sharing this, because it's being of service to others and understanding what really happens with this illness and how it affects the people in your life. It is really freaking important. It is heartbreaking. It breaks my heart into pieces, but I don't want to add any more depression to an already sad thing. Let's just focus on the fact that your diagnosis changed everything for you.
And actually go ahead and you can say the last thing you were going to say right there.
According to an article from medicalnewstoday.com.
Thank you.
Which was the last part that I just went through, the complications of, having alcohol and drug abuse and suicidal thoughts and attempts and those things.
And that's exactly what I was going to go back to just really quickly. All of those, every single one of those leads to, complications with relationships,
Yes.
So yeah, it's bad. And the terrible thing is that even when you get medicated, it doesn't mean you're going to get right on the right foot for a long time. You probably won't, it takes work.
Yeah.
And even
really
now
important to point out.
Yeah. And I still have struggles with things,
Yes.
But I could say that the complications that are listed there, not only did I exhibit those in extreme ways, all of them. Mm-hmm. I'm a recovering alcoholic with bipolar disorder. I mean, it's just like,
I love you.
I love you too. There's just a lot to say about all of that. And we're going to get into it anyways, about how all of those complications can affect a relationship.
which is where we're going right now. So basically, we've laid a foundation about a lot concerning this mental illness, and now it's time for us to dive into what it's like to have a partner with bipolar. Please note that well-managed bipolar disorder doesn't have to be a barrier to healthy and long-term partnerships. I like to think it's likely to be the symptoms of bipolar disorder and not the condition itself that may cause relationship problems.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say that it's really funny. So I just mentioned being a recovering alcoholic with bipolar disorder, but I'm also a dad. I'm a partner.
Yes, you
I
are.
am, I am a lot of different things besides just that. And I like that you put, the fact out there that it should be the symptoms and not the condition.
Of course.
And it's true. I mean, we're going to be talking about just that and about the symptoms and what it can do.
Yeah, it's very serious. It's not something that we should downplay by any means, but it is basically what it, at the end of the day, the symptoms of bipolar disorder is what kind of determines the moment. And and also with the right treatment, people with bipolar disorder may have long periods during which their mood is totally stable, or they may only have mild symptoms, which are unlikely to significantly affect their relationship. It's all a person-to-person basis. So let's talk a little bit about what happens without effective treatment. So manic episodes may cause a person with bipolar to become very irritable. And a person with bipolar disorder may disagree with their partner more easily during a manic episode. Although Nathaniel has treatment, I've learned to watch for this. The communication changes immediately, and Nathaniel doesn't want to hear anything I have to say. There's a lot of, he'll cut me off. He will begin obsessing about one thing, and I'm learning that is a part of an episode, and I know from your stories that you've experienced risk-taking behaviors, like you were saying, the spending sprees and binge drinking. But I would like for you to share, if you want to, your experience with what it was like before treatment. I mean, you've already uncovered so much, but just kind of in a little nugget, like before treatment, if you could give us just a brief timeline. Relationships, I'm talking about only relationships, what your relationships were like.
Yeah, they were difficult. I had mentioned before about one of my best friends at the time just kind of dropping me, is because I just get so I am going to keep using this word, but I get so passionate about different things.
Yeah.
Just we were talking about how I don't want to hear anything you have to say. It's because I'm so passionate about what I'm trying to tell you and express and all of these things that I don't have room to hear you. I don't have room to listen to anyone. It doesn't matter.
And this is during a manic episode.
A manic episode.
Right.
And that happens. A lot of people mistake manic episodes for being all happy, ridiculously happy all the time. That's not it at all. That can happen, that can definitely happen. But yeah, like if Shiloh and I get in a fight, I mean, yeah, good luck to her trying to get anything through. It's just not going to happen. And it's not because like I'm a controlling person or anything like that. It's just because my brain at that moment got rewired and I don't know it. I don't even know, I mean, that's the other frustrating thing is that when she's trying to tell me, I think there's something wrong, I'm not even listening to that,
No, he's just on a different level.
And what I'll say about that is that, I mean, just think of previous partners that when I wasn't medicated and didn't have, I mean, I was the very definition of impossible,
Yeah.
I challenged everyone. I went over the top with everyone. Everything was just, it's like everything is just very extreme to me. So if Shiloh says the wrong thing, it's not just that she says the wrong thing, and I'm not saying the wrong thing to me. She might not be saying the wrong thing, but she's saying the wrong thing to me. And it's not that I'm taking it as it's just the wrong thing. I'm taking it as there's a whole list of reasons why she said that wrong thing that are all wrong and all bad. And
Yeah, and it's usually part of a much bigger storyline. Like, for instance, I can say, oh God, I can't even think of an example right now, but I wasn't expecting to talk about like the argument part, but I could say something that he doesn't agree with. And then all of a sudden, it's a huge, massive problem. And then it starts to become obsessive, like this obsessive thing. And then the energy level is really, really high. And this is while he's in treatment. He's in treatment now. But before, I can't imagine what it was like. I really can't imagine what it was like. People stayed because they loved you.
yeah,
They really, because you're a great person and you're handsome and funny and smart.
well, thank you.
Well, that's why people stayed. you know. So before treatment, yikes, it's a big yikes. And now during a depressive episode, he is less communicative, very low energy, and very confused.
I get very confused.
I've experienced this firsthand a couple times, and I have to say my heart was breaking in a million pieces. I have never felt that type of heartache. I felt so helpless. I felt like I couldn't do anything to help. So please tell us what that feels like. And remember, this isn't a controllable situation by any means, people. So in depressive episode, basically concerning your relationship, like how does it feel with me?
Okay. Yeah. And, again, trigger warning. I'm just going to try to do that every time I can, if it's going to be something, because I know depressive episodes for me, if I hear someone else's story about that, it hits me harder than, say, a manic episode. So I just want to always say that, because what ends up being talked about can be in a very dark place. For me, everything is just black and gray. It doesn't matter how sunny it is outside. I don't even know it's sunny outside. And it's not that I've got the curtains closed and all this other, I don't see the world at all in that way. I now exhibit my depressive episodes through sadness and crying and things like that. Like, Shiloh's experienced that firsthand.
Yeah.
I was manic, and I was having, I was being really difficult for a whole day, and even before that, but that whole day. And then so it just led into a fight. And then, but then all of a sudden, like, for one, this doesn't happen often, but I knew something was wrong. I knew something was changing in my brain.
Yeah.
And I went from 0 to 60 back to 0, but below 0. Like, I was going in reverse. And it's very hard to explain to someone, but it's like, if you can just put life in terms of colors, it really is just black and gray. Nothing. I feel like the whole world's coming against me. I don't feel like anyone out there really, like, understands me or loves me or any of that stuff. And that's,
Right.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, Shiloh is the most loving human being I know. I mean,
Thank you.
and I just, she has an impact on me in a positive way when I'm having a depressive episode. But even then, it's like, I'm like I said, I'm struggling, because one of the things that, now that I'm medicated, now that I've got the tools in the toolbox, the one thing about it is that, it still brings up the past and how I want, I would have rather have been dead than alive.
Yeah.
And, I have to push that out. I'm doing way better with that now, but, back in the day, I probably had a depressive episode for months and months and months. And it led into, like I said, blackout drinking and stuff like that, because I just couldn't, it was just dark. I don't know. It's really hard to explain.
Well, I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it. And I just, in the moment and during the entire duration of that depressive episode, I make sure that I'm always touching him in some way. I'm always holding him very close and speaking very softly to him, reminding him, I'm right here. You're not alone. Don't be afraid. It's very confused. He will ask multiple times the same question. Did we shower today? Or did the dogs go out? The same question over and over. So I'm just really sitting there letting him know that he's not by himself, and it's okay, that this is just his brain doing some fucked up thing that isn't a reflection of him. I tell him this: you're not your illness. You're not your illness. It's okay. You can be confused. It's fine, but don't be scared, because he used to get very scared. He was very scared. He was terrified. And
that's where my paranoia gets the worst.
that's nothing. There's nothing in the world like it when you are trying to soothe your person and their brain is working so hard against you both.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to put it.
So if your significant other does have bipolar, it can be difficult to know what to say or what to do to help. You could confuse the symptoms as a lack of interest in the relationship. But I would like to share with you things that you can do to cope and better your understanding. These are things that I've done to really get what this bipolar thing is all about, because it's tricky as hell. So these are my own things that I've done. I just said that. Don't take it as the word of the universe is going to, this is not going to be good for everybody, but it might help you. And when you're in a relationship with someone that's bipolar disorder, relationships take work, right? And being in a relationship with a person with bipolar is no different. It's a different type of work, though. And sometimes it's a lot more work. Any healthy partnership requires you to have empathy and communication and self-awareness. But living with Nathaniel, I've cultivated way more patience and an extreme hunger to learn. I've had to take action to strengthen our bond. It's not going to happen just naturally. You're not going to know exactly what to do or what you're dealing with. Like, you have to know and learn about the condition. So basically, learning about bipolar disorder was and is still now instrumental in understanding what he experiences. And I just seek out reputable, well-sourced health information websites to give me a balanced view of the condition and also read other people's experiences. I want to share with you the first episode during our relationship, the very first one last year. And I was living in New York and he was 450 miles away from me. So we were long distance, and that was difficult enough. And, but at this point we had arguments. We had lack of communication. My drinking made things extra hard. But this wasn't like any other hard time. He was so distant, I couldn't feel him at all. But he was excited, very excited, and then very confused and very sad and hurt. And I tried everything I could to understand. And I did. I was reading, but I can read every article, book, and journal on the planet. I've learned everything that I've needed to know with firsthand experience. But I want to ask you, and I don't think you know that this question's coming, but what do you think I've learned, or what do you think I need to still learn?
I think, honestly, it's up to me now. I think it's one of those things where I need to learn. I need to figure out, when things are happening and what my triggers are and that sort of thing. Yeah,
we're going to get into triggers.
That's really that's going to come down to me. I mean, you truly have done tons of research. We're sitting here doing a podcast episode about it because it's she's done that much research on it, and we both feel it's very important to share this experience for those that don't understand or those that are in similar situations. But really, that's what it's going to come down to. If I could tell anyone out there, if you don't understand bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or any of those things, you really need to give it a go, because there's such a stigma attached to all of these mental illnesses. And we may, like, us bipolar folks may be less than 3% of the population, but it means a lot more to us when we're understood.
Sure.
It definitely helps things out. It certainly makes me feel less less foreign,
Right. And not alone.
Right. So that's that's probably it. Yeah, like I said,
Yeah,
it's more
the
about me
learning.
learning
It's
than
about
you.
you.
Yep.
What I've also done is I've looked for triggers, which are events or circumstances that could disrupt the mood of him. And so basically, these triggers could increase Nathaniel's risk of experiencing a manic or a depressive episode. And some triggers could be dealing with a stressful work situation that he's having, or not getting enough sleep, which has happened, or missing doses of medication, which has happened. But know that not everyone with bipolar disorder will have triggers. So this is another way bipolar is a tricky thing. Moods changes can occur without any triggers.
Which I can have both. I can have something triggered, or it happens. So
Yep. It's just one or the other. There's either a lot of trigger or no trigger. It's a good idea that if you're in a relationship with someone who has bipolar, ask them about their personal triggers if they know them, so you can better help them should those events or circumstances arise. But do you believe you have triggers? I mean, we've had arguments that stem from what I now believe is some type of obsessive manic episode. The first and second times, I didn't realize that was what was occurring. I didn't know it was an episode. I thought you were picking a fight with me because my own personal history with other people suggested to me that you were picking a fight with me. But now in retrospect, I see that both times were very similar and that you were just pinging me with questions that had already been answered in the past, just questions completely out of the blue. So for me, this behavior was frustrating. Again, I didn't realize the episode had already begun because my own idea of bipolar wasn't lining up with what was happening. So basically, after all that, do you believe that you have triggers?
So I want to mention first that, there's even a stigma surrounding triggers. Do you feel triggered? There's this,
It's a word that's being thrown around a lot in society.
just like bipolar is. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not offended. But I feel for others that are struggling with their acceptance of their own mental illness. And I really would like people to be a bit more respectful about it.
Me too.
But
don't be a jerk.
When it comes to triggers, that's been the hardest thing that I've had to work on. I accepted my mental illness when I was diagnosed. And this happens with a lot of people. I actually was very relieved. It was a situation, it was, and I was in the middle of a depressive episode when they diagnosed me, and I was like, I could breathe. I was like, oh man, there's
answers.
I can get help. I can, it was pretty magical. But the biggest difficulty for me though has been, besides recognizing an episode occurring or, whether it's starting or occurring, is recognizing what may have caused it. And that's where triggers are really difficult for me. I mean, this might sound obvious to you, but not you, Shiloh, but people listening, we've realized that if Shiloh and I get into a fight, that can trigger me. That can actually send me into a depressive episode, which means that there's a good chance I was manic right before that, So we're learning about these different triggers and so as I learn them, it's my responsibility to tell Shiloh. And it's the same with anybody who has bipolar disorder, to tell your friends, your family, your partner, your kids, that's what you have to do,
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly. If you have anyone in your life that has bipolar, ask about their behaviors. What's typical during a high or low period? How can I recognize them? Help me understand. Just help me understand. If you don't have the answer, at least I know that that's something that is unknown right now. And again, you can ask until you're blue in the face, but there's no teacher like reality. And again, like everyone is so different. So some behaviors may be a warning sign for one person, but not for another. Like a person with a high sex drive wanting to have sex often may be normal. For others, it could be a sign of a manic episode if they're very sexual. Likewise, for those whose libido is usually low, showing little interest in sex may not coincide with a low mood. However, for someone whose sex drive is usually high, losing interest in sex may indicate a depressive episode. So, learning which behaviors are normal for Nathaniel and which can indicate a shift in his mood is extremely helpful. And I'm learning how to, and I think I always will be learning how to distinguish the usual behaviors from symptoms of the illness. Another huge way to support someone in their bipolar is to support their treatment plan, asking what the plan involves. And this is a huge way to reduce unnecessary anxiety in the relationship. This supporting treatment can be medication, psychotherapy, psychiatry. What do they do? What's their plan? What's their treatment plan? But while some people appreciate being asked about how their treatment is going, others may find it intrusive. So it's crucial to talk about how best to support the treatment and whether there are aspects of treatment that a person does not want to discuss. That wasn't the case for us. Nathaniel was very open from day one about his treatment. So, but some people aren't. Some people aren't. They don't want you to know. They don't. It's for whatever reason. Maybe maybe they get pissed off talking about it. Maybe they don't think it's any of their business. Maybe they feel guilty. Maybe they feel shameful. A
lot
for
of the
whatever
times,
reason,
I think it's shame for so many people.
whatever reason, people might not want to talk about it. But it doesn't hurt to ask them, what is your treatment plan? And along with planning, creating a support plan is an amazing idea that we can, I came across that while researching for this episode. And I see it as a huge addition to our lives, creating a support plan. It just sounds like such a duh moment. But this might include planning activities, making a list of useful contacts, such as a trusted relative or a therapist, and then making adjustments to daily routine. According to UPMC, having a support plan in place reassures both partners that they will know how to respond to a very high or very low period. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree.
Creating a support plan.
I think it's a really good idea.
Right.
It's funny, we've unintentionally created a support plan in some ways. I mean, you're in constant contact with my mom, and
Right.
You recognize when things are out of whack for me. And a lot of that just comes down to the fact that we communicate, and we're really good at communicating, and not everybody is good at communicating. And you can still successfully create a support plan, even if you struggle to communicate about the mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes for any mental illness, but with bipolar disorder, one of the things that is very good is having structure.
Sure.
And with a support plan, you can start to create that structure that may not have been there before.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. I want to also touch on, for me, practicing self-care for me, because it is vital for myself, or for him, for Nathaniel, that I support my own mental health to improve the relationship, but also to cope. And how I can care for Nathaniel and myself is going to be determined by my mental health. So some ways that I practice self-care when he has a bipolar disorder include talking to a trusted friend or family member. I have 2 people that I go to for this, and I'm extremely, extremely fortunate to have them. Practicing a hobby. I've been known to throw a dream catcher together here and there.
And they're beautiful.
Thank you. Getting regular exercise. So this is a big one: walking the dogs outside, getting fresh air, and also practicing yoga. Seeing a therapist. I'm on the hunt for one now, but that will be coming. And it's very important that I'm not my partner's only support. Nathaniel has other people in his corner, and they are a part of this group of people who love him so much. So it's not just me. Also, last but not least, practicing stress relieving techniques such as mindfulness or meditation. These things really work, you guys. If you're dealing or not dealing, if you are in a partnership with someone with bipolar, don't forget to take care of your mental wellness, and just recognize that you are so important and vital to this person that you love. So you can't, fall apart,
Yeah, I
so to
mean,
speak.
one of the things I think that's really important with this is that, I have to say, like, my children's mom, so she went through quite a bit of a lot of things dealing with my undiagnosed mental illness, and she took a toll for it. She didn't have the opportunity to do these things because I didn't take care of myself the way that I should have. So basically what we're trying to say is that this can be crucial to having a healthy relationship and a healthy, whether it be, a partnership or a marriage or friends, just friends in general.
Exactly. Any relationship that you have in your life
Yeah. I
with
mean,
someone.
I really, because of my unwillingness to listen to people saying, I think you have a problem, I self-medicated with drugs and alcohol, and I self-medicated with sex, and I self-medicated with all of these different things, and everybody around me suffered because of it. Everybody. It didn't, if you were close to me in any way, you suffered because of my actions and my inability to get treatment and take care of myself. So what Shiloh's saying is I find it to be beautiful. I'm reading through it again, because it's like, that is a wonderful thing to have. And if you have bipolar disorder and you're trying to figure things out with your partner, take my advice and take Shiloh's advice and get a list like this put together. That's going to be incredible, because your partner has to take care of themselves. They can't just take care of you, and you've got to take care of yourself.
Right.
It just works better that way.
Yeah, it does. It's not going to work if you don't. So to wrap it up, I would like to thank Nathaniel from the bottom of my heart for sharing this very intimate detail of his life that is not so much a secret. It's very brave, and it takes a lot of balls to own up to things that you've done, and it's not a lot of people can do that. So with this episode, I have high hopes that we will clear some stigmas, and not hopefully, it will help. It will help other people, whether they have it or not, or they know someone or not, just to understand. Because if you don't understand, you shouldn't say the words. As simple as that. You shouldn't say bipolar. You shouldn't diagnose someone. You're not a doctor. And if someone says something that seems hurtful and is really unnecessary, feel free to speak up for me and for him. You can just say, Shiloh said, screw you.
Yes.
Don't say the word if you don't understand it.
I fully agree. And it's just, for me, it's just as important as someone, using, racial epithets and things like that. It's very much something that, I know people are getting sick of politically correct terms and all of these other things. Honestly, what's the big deal?
Politically correct, though.
But that's what I'm saying.
This is a mental illness.
Right.
It's serious.
Yeah. Like, we're not making you brush your teeth. Like, just say, just say something like,
but still
with
brush your
compassion,
teeth, please.
Right.
I hear you. I hear you a lot, loud and clear, because I'm standing right next to you, but because I also share the same exact. Yeah. And so, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to communicate with us at any time. And I just wanted to say also that having a diagnosis of bipolar disorder does not mean that a person will have relationship problems. But without effective treatment, it could cause relationship tension. So stick to a good treatment regimen. You are going to have to, search out people for a partner who is empathetic and who communicates and who has emotional awareness themselves, because you can build a long, strong, healthy relationship. So that's all I have on that. Again, please share your comments and questions with us. And thank you for listening. If you're still out there listening, I really appreciate you spending some time and giving us your ears. And have a beautiful night.
Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Shiloh, for putting this whole thing together.
Yes.
It was pretty amazing. So hopefully you learned something. And catch you on the next episode.
See ya.
Mental illness doesn't have to stop you from having a loving, healthy relationship. Self-care and communication goes a very long way. We thank you for your love and support. Did you like today's episode? Subscribe to us on Spotify or your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to follow us at Lovin' a Podcast on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook.com/LovinAPodcast. Learn more about us on our website at lovinapodcast.com. Until next week, my friends.